I'm hoping we're about to have a really compelling and courageous conversation about capital. We're here to talk about capital with conviction. I'm joined by three terrific panelists, Monica from Quona, Andy from LeapFrog Investments, and Michael from Accion, to discuss how we're reimagining deployment and purpose of capital. And honestly, I can't think of a more important time for us to be having this conversation. Over the last few weeks and months, it feels like we've seen a contraction of capital, stemming from dramatic decreases in ODA, philanthropic unease, and investor unease and caution. So the capital at our fingertips feels like it's disappearing at a time when we have a lot still to do in service of people, prosperity, and planet. It feels like for many years we've been talking about the promise and the potential for deploying capital with both financial returns and social returns. We've been talking about impact investing. And I've got to admit, it feels like we've had similar conversations for the last 15, 20 years. So let's talk and let's start with the state of impact investing. Have we made progress, or are we on this loop of promise and potential? Monica, I want to start with you.
Thank you, Payal, and it's fantastic to be here. I think the crowds alone share that we have tapped into something very important. I'm Monica Engel, one of the co-founders of Quona Capital, a venture firm focused exclusively on fintech for emerging markets. We focus on venture and growth equity because we believe simply that fintech is the most powerful tool to unlock change. I found that data on the middle class that was just presented very compelling to see the market potential. And in one way, if you look at those 4 billion of middle-class consumers relative to where we are still in early days. But I also think that's only half the story. I think it's quite fitting that you gathered all of us. Accion actually was our anchor investor, and I think actually the first institutional investor of LeapFrog. So, and that
it was on purpose, Monica.
Yeah, exactly. And that was, I think, almost over 15 years ago. So in that way, there's some to celebrate. So maybe start with good news, since we're surrounded by less good news sometimes. We have achieved real meaningful scale. Quona is at 800 million assets under management, 70 leading fintechs in emerging markets. And most of that, actually, interestingly, is in Asia and Latin America. Africa and MENA growing strongly. But the reality is, to get to scale, we need to come off the sidelines. There are many people who are paralyzed, either by fear of what's happening or confusion. And I think that's where the clarity of what we're doing and why the numbers we're sharing are critical. I think the second piece I would just say is authenticity. Sometimes in the impact investing world, we get murky. People who are venture philanthropists might call themselves impact investors. And I think really talking about performance and purpose and verifying it with data is incredibly critical. And I think thirdly, we need to have an enabling regulatory environment. I found it quite interesting that you brought Bahrain here earlier. We see people, governments in the Middle East actually leapfrogging, no pun intended, some of the other markets around them and really trying to create a digital-first economy. And I think that digitization and that engagement is really what's going to allow the acceleration of some of the change you're talking about.
Thanks, Monica. Michael, when we spoke earlier, you were vehemently opposed to the frame that I was coming with. So tell us what you think the state of impact investing.
I thought you were asking the wrong question.
Never.
We're trying to create a financially inclusive world, and the way we're going to do it is by harnessing innovation. And by those measures, we've had extraordinary success. We are living in a digital revolution that is transforming how we can see and reach and serve billions of people who've been left out of the economy, of the global economy. And we've made so much progress in the last decade. So the innovation is allowing us to reach, over the last decade, more than 1 billion people have gotten access. You saw some of it in the data just before. So I think if you keep the eye on the prize, impact investing, look, we're trying to de-risk and find and support some great innovation, but the real goal is inclusion, and the way we're going to get there is through innovation, and you're seeing it across all of our platforms.
Amazing. Andy, Michael's really optimistic. Monica's in the middle. Where are you on the spectrum?
I'm the realistic optimist. We have built over 15 years ago came here to Washington to announce LeapFrog's first fund, where it was seen as a big reach to try and reach 25 million low-income people with financial tools. Today, LeapFrog's companies serve over 400 million low-income people and over 500 million people in total. So our companies alone, more than 10% of the world's low-income population. And we've been dedicated to that group that you see there of emerging consumers through the entire life cycle of LeapFrog, because we see the opportunity set. And I guess I can say with very direct data from our 40-plus companies that there is profound optimism that is justified in that respect. I was in India 2 weeks ago at Battery Smart, one of our companies, watching people on the other side of the road queuing at Bharat Petroleum for hours and hours, not able to undertake economic activity while they queued with their auto rickshaw or their scooter. And our folks came up on the 30% cheaper vehicle because there's no petrol engine and there's no battery except battery as a service. They come in, lift the lid, pull out the battery, drop it, scan it with the digital revolution, pop in the new battery. In 1 minute, they're off, back engaged in economic activity. So there you see something related to climate, because it's an EV. You see something related to financial services. You see SMEs. You see an economy functioning in completely different ways. And just to say, impact investing was zero at that point when we all started together. Today, it is a $1.57 trillion industry. So there's a lot of, I think, empirical evidence that this is growing dramatically and is going to change the world even further.
Can't argue with that data, right? Andy, I want to stay with you. You've started us off with a concrete example. Can you give us another concrete example of an investment that has realized both return and social impact, and tell us what the path to scale these things are?
So there are multiple examples I could give you in areas like healthcare, where we've built the largest healthcare provider in East Africa called Good Life that now serves millions of people in a much better way than you get served in New York or Sydney or London. But I think in financial services, the area that we've seen the most development is in the protective financial services side. So there was lots being done in credit 20 or 30 years ago, almost nothing in insurance, savings, pensions. And all of us who are fintech investors and investors in the space have seen a radical revolution. So we've had a number of companies that we've started as relatively small companies that we've grown to reach tens of millions of people. LeapFrog's companies alone provide insurance to 200 million people. This really allows people to have the safety nets and springboards that they need. And we have sold those companies, a number of them, to Prudential, Swiss Re, Standard Chartered, Fidelity, et cetera, because they have seen the need to start moving into the likes of Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, where the demography is destiny. That's where a huge portion of those middle-class consumers that you saw are going to come from. So we've seen tremendous returns, risk-adjusted returns coming through there, alongside enormous impact. And again, profit meets purpose at the customer. So these business models that Mastercard is built on, of relatively small transactions, but engaged in many times by many tens or hundreds of millions of people, these are the business models that are owning the future. And so we should stop looking there and saying, oh, poverty, yuck, poor country, and start saying, look at those billions of emerging consumers and trillions of transactions, and as a result, trillions of dollars that can be made, and the number of lives that can be changed. I mean, it's half of humanity that's still low income.
Thank you, Andy. Monica, give us a couple of examples.
So I'd probably start with the revolution we see in both Asia and Latin America with challenger banking. So we have a partner in Mexico called Klar. They're using not only a tech stack built in Germany, so I think that's also very interesting in this world, a company that's based in Mexico using technology in Germany to serve the emerging consumer in that country. They are now using generative AI to actually offer personal banking. So as a bank, they actually mobilize deposits, which in addition to being that this demography is destiny. I love that quote. This idea that we actually have stability. So that deposit base, which comes from low-income emerging consumers in Mexico, is more stable than actually the capital markets. So from that deposit base, they lend, and they actually have AI to help them generate and help the small consumer one by one understand if there's yield-generating opportunities in their portfolio. So it's a powerful, so not only is this company backed by General Atlantic, close to $500 million in revenue from the $3 million investment we made about 3 years ago, they are actually building this business, helping small businesses, small consumers, excuse me, improve their yield using AI. So it's just one example. Like Andy, we have phenomenal examples in Asia as well as other regions, but it just shows you the power when you use technology intelligently and purposefully that you can also make money and actually create real value for the ecosystem.
Thank you, Monica. Michael, I'm hearing a thread here around digitalization being the key to scale. Talk to me about your thoughts on that.
Again, we are living in a digital revolution where it used to be in our world, the distances were insurmountable. Today, there's no distance that's insurmountable. It used to be that transaction sizes were too small to be commercially viable. Today, there's no such thing. This is all in the last decade. It used to be really difficult, almost impossible, to know what a remote smallholder farmer would need and how to serve her. And today, data analytics, we can really reach her and know her needs. And that is what's allowing us to reach people that we've never been able to reach before. You were asking for examples of both impact and returns. And I get a little bit of, not me actually, it was Monica when she was inside Accion. But these are two perfect examples. LeapFrog and Quona are really showing the world that you can have incredible impact and returns, and we were lucky enough to be involved in both of them at their creation. I'll give you one other example, just a data point. We do a lot of very early seed stage investing, and in the world of seed, fintech for inclusion, in the world of seed generally, about 25% of the companies that ever get funded make it to Series A. Right now in our portfolio, 80% of the companies are making it to Series A, which is extraordinary. I don't know how long that will last, but there's something happening here, and we are seeing extraordinary innovation that is really having great impact and hitting financial milestones. So.
And you want to know the catalytic power of investing? I believe Accion put in the first 3 million, and now we've raised close to 3 billion. So you can get 1,000-fold.
There you go. Okay. That was good.
I love it. I love it. Lots to be optimistic about. Michael, I want to ask you, I'm a former banker, so I got to know about bulls and bears. What are you bearish about and what are you bullish about?
So today we have some research that was generously sponsored by the Center for Inclusive Growth that we're releasing today. And we did a study of over 20,000 really micro businesses from Jakarta to Sao Paulo. And we're finding that for every digital tool that is adopted by micro businesses, their revenues are 10% more likely to grow, and their productivity is growing. That is really real evidence that this is working. These digital tools for micro businesses are really making a difference. That's the good news. The bad news is it's very early days, and there's so much work to do to get these micro and small businesses to really adopt these tools. So our work is cut out for us, but the impact is very, very clear.
Thank you, Michael. Monica, what are you bullish and bearish about?
So I'm bullish about the financial return opportunity and what we see in terms of who is coming. So the private institutional investors that are increasingly joining the impact investing world, that are coming in, acquiring our companies. We have exits happening, and that M&A is critical, especially as capital markets get clogged. Those private sector actors are catalytic. On the bearish side, we do see what I call a contraction in terms of some of the follow-on investing. We see some of those intermediaries kind of pausing and contracting is the best way to describe it, and falsely thinking that the risk is in markets they know less well. As we see, unfortunately, there is risk everywhere, and actually, I really invite people to come to learn to the markets that all three of us, LeapFrog, Accion, and Quona, invest in. I do think they will be the future engines of growth.
Thank you, Monica. Andy.
Well, I share the optimism around the opportunity, especially in supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises and ultimately jobs. So there's lots of concern with AI right now about the destruction of jobs. But if you look at the fintechs and companies that we support, our companies support nearly 20 million micro, small, and medium enterprises, and they together support 27 million jobs. Now, that impacts a huge number of families if you just think about the multiplier effect of a family of 4 or 5 or 6 on that 27 million. If you are able to get the right financial tools behind those enterprises that both protect and enable them, you're going to generate a huge amount of employment, and that should lead to a lot of growth in these economies from the bottom up, and I think is a source of tremendous excitement. I'm also bullish about the availability of capital increasingly for this area. If you look at LeapFrog's backers like Temasek and Prudential that have committed over $500 million, or an AIA, or IFC, or EIB, these are institutions that are committing hundreds of millions of dollars to us, billions more generally, and are coming to the mission, which we've had for a long time, of opening the gates of the capital markets to purpose-driven businesses. Now, what am I concerned about? I'm, of course, concerned about ideology of any kind hijacking this. The reality is that the exciting thing about impact investing is it's appealed across the political spectrum. If you're really far on the left, you can see this as the ultimate empowerment tools. If you're really far to the right, you can see this as people pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps, the power of capitalism, the market's working. So I think we've got to work really hard not to say, I found the one space and truth on the spectrum of impact and returns, and this is an ideological thing. I think we have to work incredibly hard to say this is a very broad umbrella. This is one of the few things in this world that we can all get behind, because it's capitalism working far better to help billions of people rise who are both humans and customers and producers and family members and community members and citizens. And so I think we should really focus on these success stories and scaling them very dramatically. There should be the Amazons, the Walmarts, etc., in the developing world that are bigger than those folks ever imagined, because the scale of opportunity is bigger than ever imagined.
Thank you. Impact investing as the new bipartisan issue. You heard it here first. We're going to start wrapping things up. So I want to take you all on a journey. A year from now, it's April 24th, 2026. It happens to be a Friday. Mm-hmm. What do you hope to see, or what do you hope will happen so we're not having this exact same conversation a year from now? Monica, let's start with you.
I hope to see new investors, new categories of LPs joining this incredible train that we're on, not just for the financial return and impact, but the metaphor that Andy just described of really symbolically saying what connects us is much more stronger than what differentiates us. And let's focus on that common purpose to make sure we succeed.
Thank you. Andy?
I'd like to see the convergence of sectors continue and accelerate this year. So the example I used of Battery Smart really combines financial services with climate. There are a lot of examples of healthcare with financial services, or healthcare with climate, or education with healthcare. So when we look at our sectors that we invest in, which is financial services, healthcare, and climate, we see an increasing synergy between these different companies. And I think you do not see people emerge securely into the middle class until they have an entire toolbox, not one tool like credit or one tool like insurance. So I'm hopeful that if we as a world, and that especially requires investors to be smart, back the right kinds of companies, that you will see many billions of people with these toolboxes securely in that middle class, not vulnerable, and that will then be a source of opportunity for businesses from Mastercard to those micro entrepreneurs we spoke about. And I think we're going to see a massive acceleration of that, because the consumer doesn't think in terms of verticals. The consumer just comes and expects to get a suite of tools.
Fantastic. Michael?
There's a moment here in our nation's capital. It's exhausting with everything changing, multiple times every day. I hope that will pass and we'll be back to some stability. But broader, the big moment, over our lifetimes, we have seen extraordinary progress in reducing poverty. Hundreds of millions of people have moved out of poverty over the last few decades. Until today, it's all stagnant. You ask me, what do I want to see in a year? I want to see that turn the corner and go back to the progress that we were making before the last few years.
Yeah.
I think all of us feel that way. Well, I'm going to try to quickly summarize what our three luminaries have said. 1, data and digital is key, but so too is adoption. 2, it's okay to start small and work with safety nets, but we have to stay in the game and we have to think globally as the game board. And number 3, there is cause for optimism. Let's make impact investing something everyone does. Thank you all. Please join me in thanking our panelists.